I hate to break it to you guys, but this whole descender thing, it isn't new. We've always known the twins were descenders, we just didn't really understand the context. See, the Traveler's character story explicitly says they descended to the continent of Teyvat. The PlayStation exclusive glider and the weapon are called the Wings and Sword of Descension. And even in the opening cutscene, it talks about how the twins fell to Teyvat. And the more you look back, the more obvious this whole descender thing becomes. But if that's the case, then why did this revelation come as such a shock during Chapter 3? Is it that most simply forgot the Traveler descended from above? Or is it that there are descenders other than the Traveler? Or is it that the Traveler's twin, who should be a descender, isn't considered one? I won't pretend to know, but I do have an idea, so in this video we are going to investigate exactly that, this whole concept of descenders, as part 2 of this 3-part investigation continues. As always, links for further reading and watching will be in the description box, while any corrections, clarifications, or fun tidbits will be in a pinned comment. I will also leave links to both Part 1 and Part 3 as they become available in the description box as well, so please make sure to check those out. They're not necessary, but highly recommended. Alrighty then, let's pick up where we last left off in Part 1 and talk about the Descenders. While we know of the existence of at least 4 Descenders, we actually only know of 1 confirmed Descender, and that's the Traveler. So basically everything we know about Descenders in general can only be viewed within the context of the Traveler, which is honestly fine because that still gives us plenty of material to work with. This doesn't mean that all Descenders will be like the Traveler, though, just that it's almost impossible to make any real predictions about what other Descenders might be like because all Descenders only have 2 things in common. The fact that they descended from above, and the fact that Irminsul does not contain any records on them. But just the fact that they're called Descenders is enough to imply that they came from other worlds or are alien to Teyvat in some way. Aliens wouldn't be able to be recorded by Irminsul as they would likely be completely incompatible, right? That's just logical. But this doesn't actually seem to be the case at all. While the Traveler is described as being an alien life form in their character stories, there are a lot of things that kind of contradict this idea. For one, only humans with visions, are said to be able to ascend to Celestia where they will attain godhood. An alien life form should not be able to do this, and yet the character cards for the Traveler and their character stories also claim that they will ascend to the seat of God. But the Traveler doesn't seem to be human, and they're also unable to acquire a vision. Therein lies a contradiction. And it gets a little bit worse. Despite definitely coming from beyond the firmament and traveling to countless other worlds, the twins have a lot of bizarre connections to Teyvat itself, enough to be really suspicious. For example, not only can the Traveler use elemental energy without a vision, which is an ability that was only otherwise available to a non-human like an Archon or an Adeptus, but they can also wield multiple elements at the same time without an external apparatus. This is something we have only seen Ajdahad do, and even then he probably only gets that ability from his deep connections to the ley lines. And no, Scaramouche's boss form does not count, but that is a completely separate discussion. The Traveler can also connect with Irminsul, which is basically like the root server of the entire world, and this takes basically no effort at all the while producing resin on a daily basis. This resin is the same resin they use to re-energize petrified offshoots of Irminsul in exchange for crystallized memories in the form of artifacts and weapon materials. That's a pretty peculiar ability for some unrelated alien to have, don't you think? And don't forget that the Traveler knows exactly what the teleport waypoints are used for, even though no one else in Teyvat does. If that doesn't seem suspicious to you, I would like to remind you that the teleport waypoints utilize the ley lines in order to warp you around. If the Traveler is an alien, then why do they know how to use these instinctively? The answer is quite simple. The Traveler is from Teyvat. If you're confused how they can be both an alien descender and also be from Teyvat, well, I was too, until I remembered something rather important. I would like to bring your attention to the infamous book Before Sun and Moon. This book is basically the most reliable record we have on the genesis of Teyvat. If you haven't read it, you should, as it appears to be a record that Irminsul failed to alter. More on that one in a bit. While the entire book is a treasure trove of info and theory fodder, it's the very first section that's always stood out to me. Let me read it to you and show you what I mean. Well, actually, I want to read you a direct translation of the passage from Chinese because the nuances are a little bit different than the official localization, and I think it's important. Here we go. The eternal throne of heaven has come and the world has been renewed. Then the true king, the original one, went to war with the masters of the old world, the 7 terror kings. Those terrible kings are dragons. So here's the thing. This passage implies that the world was ruled by dragons at one point, that's not new, but not that it was always ruled by dragons. Being called the true king suggests that the primordial one at least had some claim to this world despite coming from somewhere else, enough to wage a war against a currently dominant species anyway. If they didn't actually have a real claim to the planet, then they should be considered an alien, right? So the primordial one then goes on to win the war against the dragons, terraform the earth, and create the human race. Which means human would have alien origins if the primordial one is also an actual alien. Like, on the one hand, you can argue that because humans were created on Earth, they are therefore a native species to Earth, but I'm not too sure about that. Because Genshin references both Abrahamic and Gnostic mythology in its genesis, and in those myths, God created humans in his own image. If this holds up, then that means that if the primordial one is an alien, then humans would be based off of them and therefore also alien. And, the reverse is true. If the primordial one is not an alien, then humans that are based on him are also not aliens, right? So this begs the question, is the primordial one an alien? Well, it turns out Conria seemed to have the same question because during the quest to acquire this book Before Sun and Moon, Enjo says that Conria sent a delegation to Enkanomiya in order to find proof that Celestia came from beyond this world. In other words, proof that Celestia and those within it are aliens. He also makes the claim that back when the primordial one ruled over a single unified civilization, no gods walked the earth. That's right, no gods, none, nada. But Paimon responds to this claim saying that when gods walked the earth is as far back as history goes in Teyvat. There is no time before gods walked the earth, right? This suggests that the time when no gods walked the earth is a time that Celestia doesn't want anyone to know about, which means it was probably the unified civilization. But this whole no gods thing doesn't mean that there weren't any magical immortal beings hanging out with the humans. It just means that these beings were not considered gods. They were not objects of worship. That was something reserved exclusively for the primordial one, right? These beings probably went by an entirely different label, like maybe seelies. Because see, we know that seelies were angelic-like spirits that guided the human savages, meaning they existed when humanity was quite young, and because our only known survivor of the seelies is the goddess of flowers, we can assume that it's possible for seelies to be revered as gods. They just weren't. Now, we'll come back to this idea a little bit later, but for now, I want to point out that the only 2 civilizations known to be ones without gods or without the recognition of gods are Enkanomiya and Conria, both of whom are underground, and according to Dainsliff, they both share architectural similarities, which makes you wonder if Conria is also an offshoot of the original unified civilization. If it is, it might mean that Conria believes in more of a monotheistic god and does not believe in a bunch of polytheistic gods, right? Dainsliff's distaste for the archons and gods may be because he doesn't even believe that they should be worshipped since they are not the primordial one and therefore not actually a god. And this might actually be why Conria and Dainsliff have a bone to pick with Celestia. They may, in fact, suspect that Celestia has an alien running the show. Now remember, Enjo is searching for proof that Celestia came from beyond this world, specifically through the means of the book Before Sun and Moon. This book is the same one that got Orobashi sentenced to death by Celestia just for reading it, which suggests that its contents were never altered by Irminsul. And in this specific book, it says that at one point, the Primordial One, who should by all accounts be native to this world to some degree, if our theories are correct, was challenged by the Second Throne, also known as the Second Who Came, but came from where? This challenge resulted in a cataclysmic war that caused the heavens to fall and the earth to split open, and yet no one knows how this war ended. Although I do have my suspicions. See, in the Traveler's character card, the literal translation reads, "Your homeland has been destroyed. All of the buildings have been reduced to dust. You are originally the one who should own your own world and embrace the people within. But as the last descendant of a subjugated civilization, please do not lament the lost moments." So now we have a subjugated civilization, a traveler who's supposed to be an alien but actually has really deep connections to Teyvat's original functions, and a mysterious entity that went to war with heaven and it's said to have come from beyond this world, or at least it's suspected of it. And then we have the Abyss Twin who wants to see the return of their homeland, which has been destroyed, and I don't know, these things seem to line up a little too well. Now, if you haven't pieced it together yourself yet, I am indeed suggesting that the Traveler, and actually both twins, are from the original unified civilization. Only, instead of falling underground, they escaped Teyvat entirely, only to circle back around to it around the time of the Conrian Cataclysm, just in time to kick off the events of the main game. Now, during this time, it's probable that the Second Throne successfully took control of Teyvat. This includes control over Irminsul. And this is where I want to circle back to the other key feature of the Descenders, the fact that Irminsul seemingly does not record any information regarding them. I think this is only partly true. We don't need to look any further than the Abyss Twin to notice that something is very odd here. See, by nature of being twins, Aether and Lumine have to come from the same origins. One cannot be from Teyvat while the other isn't, unless they are not twins at all. That is a pretty valid theory in and of itself, but it's one I do not want to entertain for this video as it goes like a totally different route, okay? For the purpose of this video, we are assuming the fact that they are twins is correct. Now, notice what Nahida says about the Abyss Twin, that they suddenly appeared in Conria and traveled for a time, then appear to have vanished as if their fate was being forcibly obscured. If the Abyss Twin was like a normal Teyvat being, then there would have been records prior to their random appearance in Conria. But there aren't any records of that nature that we know of. I feel like Nahida would have said something a little bit different if those records existed at all. So here's the big thing. In the previous video, I made the case for Irminsul being a bit like the Akasha in that it doesn't decree fate, it only predicts fate, which it then displays in the sky in the form of constellations. But note that Irminsul would only be able to predict one's fate if it was also able to record data about them. So here's a fun fact for you. Prior to touching the statue of Seven in Mondstadt, the Traveler did not have a constellation at all. So not only did tapping into the ley lines give the Traveler access to the elements, it also gave them a constellation. Now, Mona, being an astrologist, uses constellations to predict things, right? Well, according to her voice lines, she knows that the Traveler is not of this world, and she therefore cannot give us an astrological reading. But in other places, like during her story quest, she still manages to somehow predict our movements using astrology, which is odd. If we were completely unrecorded by Irminsul, she wouldn't be able to predict anything at all, we'd just be a big blank space. She also can't find anything in regards to Paimon, which is also kind of odd. In Chapter 3, Act 5, Paimon's memory was tampered with just like everyone else's, save for the Traveler, which means that Paimon should be of this world, right? But she doesn't seem to have a constellation while the Traveler does have a constellation, yet the Traveler's mind cannot be tampered with. The only other person we know of that Mona cannot read the constellation of is Venti, and he's a god, so I guess this kind of makes sense. But Venti does have a constellation, like the Traveler, but he also seems to be able to have his memory tampered with, like Paimon. Well, I want to go back to an analogy I used in the previous video when I compared Irminsul to a computer or a cloud server, because I think it kind of resolves the issue around what Irminsul seems to record and what it doesn't. I just want to start by saying I think Irminsul actually records everything indiscriminately. If it's within reach of the ley lines, Irminsul can and does record it. But I also think that the twins, having come from a destroyed civilization, were also deleted from Irminsul's memory. So when they first arrived in Teyvat, Irminsul had no data on them and had to accrue it slowly over time. It also wouldn't know how to store or reference those records, seeing as it thought of these twins as unknown entities, so it didn't really have a good label for them. But when the Traveler made contact with the Statue of Seven, they basically logged into their user account, and all of their accumulated session data was then assigned to them, allowing Irminsul to give them a constellation. However, given that the Traveler's user account is literally ancient and belonging to data that should have been long since deleted, it's possible that Celestia has marked any record referencing the original civilization as classified, even to the avatar of Irminsul herself. Now remember, Orobashi was sentenced to death for reading a book about the original unified civilization. Celestia does not want anyone to know about this. This restricted access gives the impression that there are no records about Descenders when there actually should be, and is. Likewise, gods probably have all of their information under slightly different restricted access because they're, gods, archons, so that makes sense. But where does that actually leave us? This section title seems like quite a leap, I know, but stick with me, it is tinfoil hat time. If the primordial one is considered God, then its four shades should be the archangels like Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, right? Angels were organized into choirs, meaning an archangel had a higher rank than a regular angel. Now, according to the staff of the Scarlet Sands, the primordial one created night and day, which was represented by a sun and 3 moons. The 3 moons likely being the 3 moon sisters we know of as Arya, Sonnet, and Canon, who are closely tied to the seelies. The seelies are known to have been once beautiful pale beings tasked with teaching and guiding early humans, which easily makes them candidates for something like a guardian angel, or at least a lower ranked angel. Plus their regressed forms are based on a sea slug commonly known of as a sea angel, so there's that. During these early days in the unified civilization, we know that no gods walked the earth, which would make sense because angels are not supposed to be gods, they're servants of God. But angels are also closely related to demons, who, depending on the text, are all actually angels who fell from grace. Coincidentally, those labeled gods in Genshin are actually called demon gods in Chinese, and they bear the names of demons from the Ars Goetia's Lesser Key of Solomon. Now, among those names is Paimon. Paimon is kind of unique because within the game of Genshin, she behaves and looks an awful lot like how seelies do in Legends, pale and silver like the moon, flies at the speed of a seelie, likes to sing, guides a traveler, loves treasure, and she has moons and stars throughout her entire design, right? But Paimon in the Ars Goetia is most notable for their absolute loyalty to Lucifer. And who is Genshin's Paimon most loyal to? The Traveler. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but Lucifer's name literally means light bringer or morning star, and both of the twins have a golden light-based power originally. They also have wings like angels supposedly do, decorated with the Primogem star, which is a symbol of the primordial one, or at least it's supposed to represent him because the Primo in Primogem is actually supposed to be primordial, which, by the way, is also the name of the game in Chinese, the primordial god or the original god, right? All these things are connected here. Now we know the Traveler is also called the Morning Star on multiple occasions, which suggests that the Abyss Twin might be the Evening Star, which is fitting since these two stars are technically the exact same star in the sky, hence twins. The twins also refer to themselves as literal stars, which is funny because in a lot of Abrahamic theology, it's believed that angels are actually considered stars in the sky, whereas archons are like the planets. And note, despite being one of God's most beloved angels, Lucifer was thought to have been the angel who attempted to place their throne above God's, which is what got them cast out of heaven in the first place. Although this seems to be the case only in texts that consider the name Lucifer to be synonymous with Satan, but that's again another investigation for another day. But going back to Enkanomiya and the unified civilization, I want to point out a series of achievements. One of them references Kairos, another Phosphoros, and the other Hesperus. Kairos is obviously referencing the god of time, a shade of the primordial one, so, like an archangel. But Phosphorus and Hesperus, those happen to be two alternate names for Lucifer. The point here that I'm trying to make is that this dualistic nature of Lucifer as the light bringer and the night bringer, the good angel and the evil angel, it seems to be something embodied by the twins and the paths that they chose. In light of all this, I can only conclude that the twins are not only beings that belong to Teyvat, but are in fact angels from the primordial era. Specifically, the embodiment of Lucifer, entities that would descend from the sky like the envoys of heaven described in the Tiara artifact sets, and who would possess a level of authority within Irminsul's systems that are unavailable to gods even of Nahida's rank. It's possible, too, that due to the passage of time, that the traveler has some large gaps in their memory, and that they must travel through Teyvat just like their twin did in order to not only recover their memories, but also their original powers. It's possible that the Abyss twin also knows everything and is siding with the Abyss Order in order to resurrect their destroyed homeland while also destroying the Second Throne in the process. After all, the Traveler's character card outright states that they are the ones who should own their own world and take care of the people within it, and that they will ascend to the seat of God. I can't help but wonder if the twins were originally heirs to the Throne of Fanes, if they were supposed to inherit the earth but were interrupted and cast out by the Second Throne. The secondary names of Lucifer, the Phosphorus and Hesperus, being mentioned casually alongside the god of time Kairos, who we know to be a shade of the primordial one, also makes me wonder if Kairos herself isn't pulling strings in the background, trying to assist the rightful heirs in obtaining their rightful place. Kairos is brought up time and time again, and I just can't help but think that maybe Kairos was one of the Moon Sisters, and the Moon Sisters loved the Morning Stars just as much as they loved each other, like they were family. And those Morning Stars should be Lucifer, it should be the twins, and those same Morning Stars were said to have survived the calamity that destroyed not only the Moon Sisters, but also the seelies. And I think we're good to leave it there for now. That concludes most of my thoughts on the Descenders, but there are still a lot of loose ends to tie up as a result of Part 1 and Part 2. Earlier, I likened the seelies to angels and the demon gods to fallen angels, or demons, or both. We're going to investigate this train of thought in great detail in Part 3, and the final destination of that train will be the proposed identity of the god of time. I'm certain you will not want to miss that, but that'll do it for me today, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you to every one of you who watched this video, and a very special thank you to every single one of my members who helps make this video possible. Thank you very, very much to each and every one of you who watched this video all the way to the end. You guys are absolutely the best of the best. I will be back soon with Part 3, so until then, take care, guys. I am off to the Abyss to fetch another bucket of forbidden knowledge, so don't wait up.